share my screen. Hi, everyone. It's incredible to see all of you on the call. Let's see, share screen. Here we go. And there, one more step. Okay, how does that look? You got it up and running? Okay, great. Well, hi everyone. I'm Jenna Koloski. I'm the Community and Policy Manager with the Council on Rural Development. So I work with John, Nick, and Margaret here. Normally, we're out, like John said, we're out meeting folks in the community, helping to facilitate conversations at the community level. And I, like John, really miss being in person with all of you. But we have also had the chance to really build our skills around online meetings. We've had online meetings anywhere from 3 or 4 people up to 120 or more. And so we've had a chance to kind of make these meetings work one way or another. So I'm just going to go back to the fundamentals of effective meetings. I look around the kind of list of people on this call. Some of you are incredibly skilled facilitators. And so some of this will be really simple and basic, but I know in the survey response, some people are fairly new to managing a meeting and bringing people together. So I'm going to start with the fundamentals. And for those of you with a lot of experience, you may take away some tips here and there. And then of course, Delia is going to dive into more of that community and public engagement aspect, which I hope will be useful as well.
Jenna, I can't hear you anymore. I don't know if I'm the only one.
Can other people hear me okay?
Yeah, you're coming through loud and clear. So I think
Okay.
that might just be you, Leora.
And I'm seeing Leora is frozen, so it could be maybe an internet
Okay,
connection.
now I can hear you. Thank
Okay, well, thanks for letting me know. People should let me know anytime if there are some challenges. All right, so when we think about the meeting fundamentals of effective meetings, we kind of broke it down into 3 steps. You've got the advanced work, setting up for success. You've got the in the meeting, right? So in the moment, how are you kind of building unity, staying on track, keeping people engaged? And then the follow-up is really just as important as both of those. So I'm going to walk through those 3 aspects. So the advanced work. So the meeting itself is critical, but doing that work up front is really key to the success of a meeting. And number 1 is really about defining your purpose. So John kind of walked through, there's all kinds of different reasons that we're getting together, both in person and now online. And so before you dive into a meeting and bring people together, it's really about thinking, why am I bringing people together? In some cases, that's really simple. It's a committee meeting. You've got to get together. You've got to get work done. In other cases, you might be starting a new initiative where you want to brainstorm next action steps, or you're bringing people together to either share opinion or to make decisions. The important thing is to be really clear going into the meeting. What are the outcomes you're looking for, and what are you trying to get from the people that you're bringing together? You know, there's nothing worse than showing up for a meeting thinking that you're going to make decisions, but then it's really just about providing input and you're not making decisions at all. And so being really clear about that from the start is really important. And then based on that purpose, set a clear agenda. Many of us have probably seen those meeting agendas that are that long list of all the topics that you could talk about in an hour. But it's really useful to actually set, like, here are the 3 things we're going to get to realistically, and there's 15 minutes for each. So there's clear time frames of what you're going to accomplish in each of those slots. That way you have a guide for the conversation and a really simple, clear path towards getting to those outcomes that you're looking for. One useful thing to do ahead of time is define roles. Many of you, because you're here, I'm assuming you may be chairing a meeting. That's one role to really manage, and we'll get into that role. But also you want someone to capture minutes. You don't want to be chairing and trying to take notes at the same time. And also, and I'll get into some other tips on online meetings too, which might have some different roles. But then you get into the meeting invitation and outreach. Again, sometimes that's really clear. It's a committee meeting. The people that are attending are the defined committee. Other times, you might need to think about who you want to bring into the conversation. Are there different voices you want to be sure are heard? Is there some individual outreach? Do you want to invite people personally to be a part of the conversation? And then, of course, it becomes even more important with those public engagement conversations that Delia is going to get into, to really think about how do I meaningfully engage a broad audience in the conversation? So really getting clear about who you're going to invite and bring in, and then sharing that agenda ahead of time, being really clear about the purposes, getting that out to folks ahead, and really outlining the plan for the discussion. So for the, I'm going to kind of build in the online tips as we go, but for this, there's a lot that can help to make a successful online meeting ahead of time. One is sharing the info ahead of time on how to join and be really clear about how to get in. You should assume that instructions are needed. Some of us are on Zoom calls all day long and know just how to log in and troubleshoot. Some of us have never been on a Zoom call before, and we're all learning together in real time. So providing instructions, being clear about the platform you're going to use, and how people can log in. And also really helpful to have somebody available, a phone number that people can call, an email that people can write to if they're having trouble logging in. And that comes down to defining virtual meeting roles. You're going to want to have your chair and your minutes, but we have found it's really useful in online meetings to have a couple of other roles. To have one person that could be that tech support. Margaret's doing it for us today, that when people are emailing and saying, I can't find the link, Margaret is taking care of that. Screen sharing, Margaret's leading on that. So having somebody to manage that. But also, if you're going to be using the chat function in an online meeting, it's really hard for me right now to be talking and also monitoring a chat, monitoring raised hands, and monitoring tech issues. So to have somebody to play that role is really helpful. It's helpful to make them a co-host so that they can really be a part of leading the conversation. They can also help with the muting and unmuting of people, that maybe there's some noise in the background. They can kind of track where that noise is coming from. Finally, preparing and testing your system ahead of time. For some of you that came on early, you heard John and Margaret and I workshopping some last things. It's really helpful to get online and just test how it's all working ahead of time. At the meeting, so now we're going to get into the bulk of it. The beginning is pretty clear. It's really nice to open a meeting, make everyone feel welcome and heard, do introductions around the room, review the agenda, and set clear expectations for what you're planning to accomplish. For online, just a couple things up front. In terms of those introductions, everyone's seeing your screen differently. It's not like you can go around a table and introduce. So as chair, it's helpful for you to go around the screen. You may need to call on people to do introductions. We found that's the best way to do it. Also, take some time to orient people up front to the platform and how you expect them to use it. If it's a small group, you could let them know, if you want to contribute, you could click on participants and click on raised hands to share, or unmute yourself and let me know when you want to participate. But generally showing people how they can stay on mute, how they can unmute. If they're on the phone, to let them know, hey, press *6 to unmute to contribute what you want to share, so that everyone feels like they know how to participate and how to navigate. So taking that time can be really useful. So if you're the chair of the meeting, it's really, sometimes people can be in that chair role and think that their role is to set the agenda and then show up, and everyone's going to cooperate and get along, and they can kind of sit back and let that happen. But really, it's the chair's role to make sure that this meeting is moving forward, is managed effectively, is sticking to the agenda and accomplishing the things that you want to accomplish. So the chair role is actually pretty active. And even though it's a little bit uncomfortable to be in that role, it's really important. People that you want to engage in a conversation, those smart, active, engaged, dynamic people, they don't want to attend meetings where nothing's accomplished. It's really your job as chair to make sure every meeting is important, every meeting is accomplishing something. And then you don't lose those people who are like, well, why am I going to a meeting where we're talking about the same thing we talked about last month? It's really about moving it forward. So the role of chair is to serve the entire group, remain as neutral as you can, facilitate fair and productive conversation, make sure that voices are heard, sticking to the agenda and accomplishing what you've said you're going to accomplish, making sure all voices are heard, helping the group come to decisions and action. People like to talk, and sometimes in a meeting, you'll get people kind of repeating or describing or maybe going back to the challenge statement. But as a chair, it's your job to really help the group come to that decision and decide, okay, hearing all that, what are we going to do? What's the next step? Also, it's being a cheerleader for the group. everyone loves to hear that they're doing a good job. It's really useful for the chair to say, gosh, we accomplished so much in that meeting. Thanks, everyone. Really value your input, and be that cheerleader. And also sometimes be the public voice for the group. In a community, you might be speaking to the select board about the group. You might be posting on Front Porch Forum. You might be that kind of liaison between the community and your group. This is a lot on a slide, but just some tricks around effective meeting facilitation. And I'm going to get a little bit more into some specific strategies in the next slide. But again, staying in charge, managing the meeting to the agenda and timeline, and I'll go through some strategies with you. Being aware of different communication styles. You know, some people are ready to dive right in. Some people are a little bit quieter. This is particularly true in an online platform. I'm really finding in my meetings that people that I would even in an in-person meeting expect to dive right in are feeling a little bit more hesitant about diving in on an online platform. It could be they're uncomfortable with the technology. It could be it just feels strange. Offering some different ways to engage can be really helpful. Some people engage in writing, and you could have flip charts on the wall where people could write down ideas rather than sharing out loud. Same goes for online. You could use the chat function. You could use a shared Google Doc where people can contribute ideas. So just thinking about what are the different ways that we can bring people into this conversation that doesn't involve them being responsible for putting themselves out there, because it's intimidating to put yourself out there in any meeting setting. Recognizing and respecting unpopular opinions. It's not our job as chair to tell people whether they're right or wrong. It's really our job to make sure they're able to contribute, and then to gather the group's input and kind of the collective will of the group. If somebody's sharing an unpopular opinion, you know that probably the next person is going to come in and share their opinion, and the group's going to kind of come to a balance point on the issue. So letting that rise to the top and not kind of shutting people down just because you don't feel like their opinion is the right one. You may not, but it's helpful to kind of let that come through in the group and build unity and points of consensus and decision. And then finally, making sure there's buy-in for the group's decision. So when you're nearing the end of your agenda item, it's your job to say, all right, we've only got a couple minutes left. Let's come to a decision on next steps. You know, Tom and Maria, sounds like you've agreed to do this. Let's put you down to sign you up for that, and let's come back to it next month and report back. You know, really come to that final decision. And then at the end of the meeting, setting the next meeting date, making sure everyone knows when it is, and maybe even reiterating those action steps that were decided. One other thing too is just in those decision points, I will just say you do have formal tools available to you. Many of you probably know Robert's rules, that kind of thing. Sometimes these decisions can be informal, but if you need to, you can employ some formal tools that people would respect, like Robert's rules, or even we love some dots on flip chart paper, dot voting to share input and decisions. So just really quickly, just some tools. I find when I facilitate meetings, challenges come up again and again that are kind of the same. And it's nice to have these little scripts in your back pocket you can employ when that situation comes up. I have the ones that I use all the time, so I'm going to share those with you. We all have our different styles, and so you can adapt to your style of facilitation. But here are the things that I can use. One is, and it's your job to help the group find common ground. And I'll just share a little tool that can be really useful. When you're hearing, you have all kinds of different opinions coming out. You're hearing Tom saying a few different things, John saying some different things, Anne is saying one or two things that might be different. It can be helpful to repeat back what you're hearing and maybe suggest an idea. You can even kind of be controversial, put something out there. It's really helpful to acknowledge the piece in the room and maybe even acknowledge that they know better than you. Even if you don't think that's true. But it's nice, it can be really helpful to say, gosh, you guys all know way better than me, but I heard Tom say this and Mary say this, and does this seem right? And kind of put something out there. And generally, if you find that balance point, people will say, well, that seems reasonable. But it can be really helpful to kind of own that rather than saying, here's what I think is right. To say, you know, you guys are way better at this stuff than me, but let me describe what I'm hearing. Keeping comments brief and to the point. It is okay to cut people off in a meeting. That is okay. And that person might be a little bit upset with you in the moment. Everyone else in the meeting is glad that you did it because there's always that one or two people who can dominate conversations. They have a lot to share and they're comfortable sharing, and that's okay. but it's also okay as a chair to make sure that you're bringing other people's voices out. So one strategy I like to use, if you have someone taking notes, which you should, it can be really helpful to say, I think Jim's got that idea recorded. We're hearing what I hear that you're saying this. Let's make sure we're hearing everyone else's voices too. So kind of gently remind them that other people need a chance to talk as well. Or to say something like, we've only got 10 more minutes left on this topic. Why don't we wait on people who've already spoken and let's hear from people who haven't had a chance to share yet. So just kind of gently, without telling someone, without rudely cutting someone off, you can remind them and let the rest of the room know that I hear that there are people who haven't had a chance to share, and I'm gonna just set this person aside for a second. And that's okay to do, and in fact, it's helpful. Being a strict timekeeper, you can use your agenda as the guide to bring people back. You know, that agenda is your tool. We've only got 15 minutes left on this topic, or if someone's off topic and they wanna talk about the pothole on Main Street, you can say, well, that's really important. I'm going to jot that down for later. Right now, we're talking about the bridge on Bridge Road, whatever it is. So kind of redirecting people to that topic and use that as your guide. Ending circular or repetitive conversations. We've all heard in meetings that when, especially there's a tense topic, we can go around and around in circles. It's your job to end that when you see it happening. So when you see kind of repetitive back and forth describing challenges, it's really helpful to just point that out. Gosh, it feels like we're going around in circles here. I want to ask for, do people have positive action items to share to think about next steps? So really redirecting people to next steps and action. And then finally, not allowing for interruptions. I like the term, this person has the floor. It's a nice way to say, can you let this person speak, please? So if somebody's having a side conversation, if someone's interrupting, you say, you know, I want to make sure I'm hearing what Anne is saying. Anne has the floor right now, and kind of redirecting to the person that's speaking. So really keeping that organization in the meeting and making sure you're moving forward. And then finally, follow up. So you've had an effective meeting, you've come to decision, you've recorded all the decisions that were made and reported those back to people. Keeping people engaged and maintaining momentum by keeping track of decisions and assignments, reporting back clearly in a timely way, and letting people know what to expect next. Just a helpful online tip there, you know, you're able to record online meetings. That's a really great way to keep people in the loop and share those recordings. You can also save the notes from the chat. So if there was some chat going on in the discussion, some links that were shared, you can copy those in the meeting, or they'll be sent to a Zoom folder that you can share and follow up with folks afterwards, so those things aren't lost at the end of the meeting. So those are kind of just the basic fundamentals of that kind of committee type meeting. But I know a lot of you are engaging more broadly with the public. And so I want to turn it over to Julia. Like John said, she has a lot of experience with bringing folks together, and now in an online format. And we're eager to hear from her.
Great,
Julia?
Thanks a lot. Thank you. And it's so great to be here with all you guys, leaders around the state of Vermont. I'm introduce myself briefly because I haven't been part of this group. I work all around the country with national parks and national forests. I'm a 6th generation Vermonter, so I've done a lot of work in Vermont as well, and I'm excited to be working with you guys. And I just wanted to acknowledge that some of you I know. I see you, Hello, Casey, and so it's fun to see some familiar faces as well. I hope this whole screen sharing is gonna work great. Let's see here. Looks like it's just gonna, is it?
It looks good.
Let me share the screen. Are you guys all seeing this? Perfect, good. Okay, so I'm gonna just try to fly through in my little 15 minutes to talk about what happens when you pull the public into to everything Jenna just said. So basically, if you think about how hard it is to organize a good, solid meeting, and then you add in that it's going to be virtual, and then you add in that you're pulling in the public, basically everything Jenna just said applies, but on steroids, because you've got two of the biggest challenges that you're trying to add. So what I want to do is just punch on some of the key points that Jenna made that you might do differently or do in an amplified way when you've got the public coming. what I find is that virtual meetings take more time to prepare for than in-person meetings, which feels the opposite because you don't have all those supplies to deal with, but you've got to so carefully think things through. I pulled this from the Community Leadership and Action booklet that you guys all received in advance of this meeting on page 2. It's really nice to lay out, I think, of looking at what your goals are for the meeting. And your goals might be, as Jenna said, just saying, no, we want some public opinion on this. Or they might be, we're going to make a decision together. Or they might be, we want to inform you about some things. You need to be super clear what your goals are so that you can design the right meeting structure to go with those goals. It's going to look different depending on what it is you want to do. So you want to ask yourself ahead of time, you know, as you're part of preparing, where are we? Where do we want to be? What role is this meeting going to play in moving us there? What would a home run look like? I'm not a sports fan particularly, but I always ask that question. What would a home run look like coming out of this meeting? Because that's what we're going for. And then knowing that, you're able to design a meeting that will get you there. And then you need to think about every segment of the agenda. So as you think about the opening, the icebreakers, the way you pull people in, the informational part, the part where you're actually trying to solicit public opinion, the part where you're possibly doing some kind of prioritization and moving toward decisions, each of those segments of your agenda needs to link to the goals, needs to link back to where you're trying to get to. And then once you're super clear on what it is you're trying to accomplish, you need to be able to communicate that. So the public won't be able to read your mind. And if they need to know, is this meeting for me? Am I interested in this meeting? Do I have a role in this meeting? Do I already know everything so I don't need to be informed? I want to come to something where I can talk about my opinions. Or you know, do I need to come and get some information ahead of time? So as much as you can, trying to lay out as much information as you can about what people can expect when they get to the meeting. You can't over communicate about this stuff because people aren't going to see all the ways you put it out there. On page 5 in your booklet, it's got bunch of nice examples of ways to send out information, whether it's on Facebook or it's through your front porch forum, or all the ways there are to get information out. I would say communicate, then communicate again, then communicate again. Keep on putting out information so that people can be fully prepared and know what to expect. I saw that some of the people in the poll were interested in knowing what's the right technology. Some of that depends on who you are. As I said, I work a lot with national parks and they're no longer allowed to host Zoom meetings. They can only host Teams meetings, which stink, in my opinion. They don't have the flexibility that for large group meetings that Zoom do. So there are a lot of different options. I think that you need to be looking at what you're allowed to do depending on which entity you're working with, and then which platform is going to be the best for being the most accessible to the most people. So I use Zoom myself, and I've found that it's worked pretty well, and particularly in large group meetings where I'm trying to pull more people in. No matter how much you prepare, tech will go sideways. Jenna said this, and I just want to reinforce it, that you can expect it to go wrong. So what you either have to do is build 10 or 15 minutes in at the beginning of your agenda for people to muck around, or let people know they're welcome to join on 10 or 15 minutes early, get their text set up, make sure you can hear them, and then go get another cup of coffee and come back or whatever. Jenna mentioned the idea of having a helper who can be your assistant and who can, sort of manage tech on the side. I really agree with that concept. So I think you need to try to have a helper. You need to, I guess Margaret's playing that role, who I haven't met yet, but nice to see you, Margaret, in this setting. So if you've got someone, they can do all kinds of things for you. They can monitor the chat. They can see if people are raising their hands with questions. They might be taking some notes for you. that you later would share toward the end of the meeting. They might help, if people get kicked off and need to get back in, any of that kind of stuff. And as you can see in this slide, I tend to prepare a extremely detailed facilitator's agenda. So the public never sees that. Nobody sees it except me and maybe my helper. But we know we're in this 5-minute block, we're in this, who's doing this, here's what's gonna happen, here's how, in this case, Hannah will manage this so that I can do that next part and be ready, that kind of thing. And then I think you need to be fully prepared to do emergent design and throw that agenda out the window. If it turns out that that there's a lot of conversation around one topic, you can do a process check and say, this seems like a really rich topic for us. I'm wondering if we might want to give it a little more time, and that will mean we'll have to defer this to our next meeting, that kind of thing. So help, as you go through, you're the one who knows actually how much time there is, and you can allow key discussions to sort of emerge and change as needed. The other thing your helper can do is they can be talking with you on the side. So you can see in this situation, you can see me at the top, that's Sonia next to me in the black sweater, and I'm going, Sonia, help! I'm sending her an SOS by private chat. How are we ever gonna get to the final version of Mission Vision? She's like, we can do it over lunch. I'll work, and so I often, what I often do is do that in text, actually. I have my phone going and I'm texting somebody, so that, because it can be complicated to do it in the chat. You've got private chat and public chat, and it's easy to mess up. So, but sort of saying, what do you think? Should I let this guy go longer? I'm not, is this important topic? I'm not even sure. That. So oftentimes having sort of private lines of communication can be really helpful. I just want to talk about, this sounds a little bit silly, and I want to make the case that it's not silly. You want to look your best if you're facilitating the meeting or being the chair. You want to make sure there's good light on your face. That really builds trust. I was recently facilitating a meeting with a guy. He was the expert from UMass Boston, and he was trying to present a view that some people felt was pretty controversial. And his face was complete shadow. He was totally backlit. And I was trying to say to him before the meeting, people need to trust you. They need to be able to see your face. So it actually makes sense to spend the time, walk around your house with your phone and sort of find the nicest background so that you can make sure that you sound good and you look good and that kind of thing. I think it helps. Might seem silly, but I think it actually enhances the overall meeting. So this is what I look like right now to you, roughly. This is actually what I look like in my house. I've got this complete chaos of projects, but I've got my Zoom zone where I look kind of better than so that I can, and sort of an enhanced reality. And I found this cartoon in the New Yorker where this guy's doing the same thing. He looks awfully sharp there with his nice shirt on, and the rest of his house is messed. So just think about that. I also really encourage you to think about who's coming to your meeting. What I do, and maybe I'm old school, but it's been working really well for me, is if I literally print out a paper list of who I think is going to be there. Because I find that if it depends on whether this is an open public meeting or whether it's a meeting that you know who the participants are. But I find that when I've got a paper list, I can keep track of who's spoken so far, who hasn't. I can encourage people who maybe haven't spoken, to, Jenny, we haven't heard from you yet. Do you have a thought, or not to, or whatever. It helps me to plan the breakout groups, and it helps me to sort of make sure as I go through the introductions, if I want everyone to do an introduction, I can, because they bounce around on the screen, you can't just do it looking at the setup. It helps me to keep track. So that's how I do it. It's really important in public meetings to engage your municipal officials if they aren't engaged. So if you are going to be looking for support for municipal, county or state kinds of initiatives, if they can buy in ahead of time, it's going to help you out. So so pulling them in, getting them on your committee, there's a whole bunch more about that on page 41 of your manual. And then I think it's important to think about, we're now in the meeting. You want to make sure that all the meeting participants can engage fully. So at the beginning of the meeting, I set up some housekeeping. This is a slide I often use. Just let them know we'd rather have your camera on because we want to be able to see your face. We're trying to build a sense of community. Mute yourself when you're at speaking. We've all experienced the adverse effects of people not doing that. In Zoom, it's nice to let people know they can rename themselves if they want, so that they don't have to go by their, husband's name on their Zoom account or whatever it is. So that you can see who it is. Encourage people to use gallery view rather than speaker view unless there's a presentation like right now. And then let them know what to do if there's a tech issue, who they can call. Jenna talked about group agreements. I just wanted to talk again about the importance of those in public meetings. I think it's really important to, at the beginning of the meeting, put out something like what you learned in kindergarten. They're not rocket science, but people can use the reminder that we're trying to move together toward common understanding here. So it's important to speak your truth, to listen for understanding, that kind of thing. I also think it can be really helpful just to have some group agreements about how we're going to function in terms of hand signs. So I introduced this idea. We're going to do thumbs up. And if you're in Zoom, you actually can do a virtual thumbs up. But we're going to do, this is thumbs up. I'm going to be asking you for sort of some consensus that way. Or I don't know if any of you, I sometimes do this and I sometimes don't. Quiet Coyote, all the parents will be familiar with this, and that a lot of schools use it. Sort of, everybody put your ears up, your mouth closed, let's focus. If you have a question, to raise your hand. Sometimes people don't know how to jump into the conversation. People often, as you know, start to speak when they're on mute. So either the cupped ears or some way of letting them know. I use fist to 5 a lot. Fist is no, 5 is yes, and then anything in between, roughly. So just asking people, I just want to get a sense of the room on this. It's not a vote, but how are you feeling? Does everyone feel that we have the basic facts about this, or whatever it is, fist to 5, and you can, if you can see the whole group, you can quickly get a sense. And then jazz hands are just wonderful thing that I think have become more and more popular in Zoom. It's like, yay, yes, and that keeps people moving. I encourage interpersonal connection. I think that if you are trying to get a group of people to feel trust and empathy, then it's already harder because of the fact that there are these little micro delays and you can only see the top part of their body and all that kind of thing. So finding ways to build more and more interpersonal connection is important. If the group size allows it, I would go around and do a round of introductions, giving them some kind of prompt. If it's a really reasonable group size, you can invite everyone to share a photo. This guy's sharing a photo of himself on vacation, but you can see in the chat at the same time that Leola has just shared some really difficult stuff she's going through. Her mother and dog both died in the same week. So, people are offering that, and Bethany had a baby. So as you can read in the chat, people are, having those side conversations while at the same time connecting personally. And I think that then makes it more possible for them to make those hard decisions. So what I think doesn't work in virtual meetings is to say, does anyone have an idea? It works a lot better to just call on people, and that's why having that piece of paper, who have I called on lately, and try to encourage more and more people, more and more different voices to be part of the conversation. I think emotion is important. I think that emotion is part of building trust and part of building community. And I think too often we shy away from it. I would let emotions be there in a way that's productive. If people feel sad, these are scary times. It's okay to be scared right now. Or if people feel a lot of joy and laughter together, it can help advance the agenda that you're trying to advance. So I think thinking about letting emotion be there. If people feel angry, finding ways to have them communicate about it in the chat, breaking people into small groups, that kind of thing can help with that. And then part of keeping the meeting going is mixing it up as you go. I find that as the facilitator or chair, it really helps to kind of say, we're doing really well. We're about halfway through what we wanted to talk about, or, that's great. We're right on time. Now let's transition to this conversation. Or that feels like an important point, but I think it's going to be more important for us to talk about later. I'm going to put it in my virtual bike rack, you know, what they used to call parking lot, and just hold on to ideas and loop back to them later. So using statements to clarify where you are makes a big difference. It reassures people that someone's in charge and that the meeting is going well, and that they can use your voice as the signal in ways that they might normally be able to get in an in-person meeting. Breakout groups work really well, I think. We're going to be doing them some later on today, getting people into small groups where they can share their ideas, capture notes, and then come back together as a way to give people more of an opportunity to participate, and also a way to have, you know, move quickly through some material and work towards solutions. Polls are great, I think, on Zoom. I often do them. You know, they're just a chance to kind of get people. Some of them are silly, you know, some of them aren't, or get people to move pretty quickly towards some kind of basis for then having a conversation that can move toward consensus. I wouldn't, if you take a poll and you really mean it to be decisional, I would let people know that. Otherwise they feel pretty ripped off. And then just ensure follow-up. It really matters that minutes go out right away. I think people trust the meeting more if they see the minutes come out within a few days. And if people were invited but didn't participate, I think still in this day and age, transparency is so important. So letting people know where the notes of the meeting are, making sure that they're available. And then, you know, as the Community Leadership and Action Manual points out, giving participants one next step is really empowering. Here's one thing you can do. Here's something you can do before our next meeting. Here's something you can do in your neighborhood, or have this conversation, or go talk to 3 people, or whatever. And there are a whole bunch of ideas about that in part 3 of the manual. And then lastly, I just want to encourage all of us to embrace this opportunity. It's a whole different way of working. Like all of you, my pivot this spring was extreme. I had millions of flights I had to cancel, on millions of parks I didn't, you know, everything. And all of a sudden we're working, sitting in our living rooms. And I think there are so many potential benefits. I think that people sometimes doing strategic planning in 3-hour chunks is better than 3-day chunks. People have chance to think in between. The environment does better when we're not traveling all over the place. You know, I think we can still have social cohesion even while maintaining our physical distance. So the things I think are critical to make that effective are, we just need to all get better at tech. Some of us have kind of resisted tech, but this is not the time. So hone your tech skills. Think about what's possible and what isn't with tech. I've done a bunch of team building lately where people go pretty personal, and it can work in this. You know, I think that they can feel safe. And then really importantly, and particularly when you're doing public engagement, you have to think continually about access and equity, and how to make sure that people are able to engage in these meetings without the assumption that every single person has a computer in their home. And so can they come in by phone? Are there, what are the other ways they might be able to join? How can you continue to reach out? And that's all I've got. I wish you all the best of luck as you go about doing this important work that we're all engaged in.
Wow, Delia, that was awesome. That's a lot packed into 15 minutes. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah, how about some jazz hands? That's right.
Thank you.
Hey, and I just also want to sort of acknowledge and compliment folks for the really dynamic conversation going on in chat. Like, to me, that's one of the sort of powerful things about a forum like Zoom, is that you can have this whole parallel conversation and points of follow-up and sharing, that there's a lot there, and we'll certainly be capturing that and sharing that back out as well. You know, at this point, we've got to make a quick transition. There's about 90 of us here, and you know what's amazing is when I looked at the list of registrants, I found about 7 folks who had registered who I said, hey, those folks can facilitate this conversation. And the truth is, I bet all of you could facilitate these breakout conversations. But I went ahead and invited a group of a team of facilitators. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to break out. We've got about 25 minutes. So facilitators, this means we're going to have to keep things moving. And here's the way the conversation's going to go. We're going to do a really quick round of introductions just so everyone gets a feel for who they're talking to. And then we're going to go around and hear from each other about what are some great experiences they've had in meetings and some challenges they've had in meetings. And your challenge here is to be really concise as you share this. I know we all want to share some great stories, but with 10 of you in a round robin, that means we're going to have to be really concise, because the end of the breakout is just some sort of reflecting on some of the common themes and thinking together about how we address those opportunities and challenges. We feel like it's important to get into some small groups so that all of our voices can contribute to this conversation. So with that, I think Margaret is going to send us off to our breakouts, and we'll come back in about 25 minutes for some sharing of notes. Thanks. Came up. It was terrible timing.
It's really modeling effective facilitation.
It's always a work in progress.
Man.
It feels dramatic to see that ticking countdown too. Like, what happens when the clock hits 0?
I know. It's like a rocket's gonna lift off or something when you get
So
to
much
0.
more I wanted to say to my group.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I can say, like, we had a great conversation in our group, and so what we are going to do, our facilitators, I've given them a real challenge, which is literally in 1 or 2 sentences to summarize 1 or 2 themes of what we just heard in our conversation. And just to be clear, that's an impossible task for our facilitators. So, like, what we're not going to get to is all the substance that we just talked about, but just maybe one little nugget, and just to share and get a sense. So I think what I'm going to do is call on folks to make that happen. I'm going to do the best I can with that, and I'll start just to get things going. You know, one thing we talked about is that sometimes some of the dynamics where things were intense with in-person meetings can actually be exacerbated and tougher to manage when you're online, when passions grow strong. You know, the example was shared of like a design review board meeting with a controversial application and the chat being really intense and probably needing to be managed in a way that it was new to the group, and they just, and we're all learning as we go. So that was another thing that I'll just share, is the incremental progress we're all making in this work, right? We're all learning how to do things better. So let me go over to Nick on our team.
All right, thanks, John. 1 sentence or 2, I'd say, yeah, we also touched on really a love-hate relationship with the chat in particular, that it can be a really great mechanism for engaging with questions in live time, but also really distracting if there are presenters or if you are the presenter. So navigating that balance on a per meeting basis, I think, is something we explored.
Great. Jenna.
I think the key takeaways from my group are, one, that not every tool translates directly to online from in-person, that building in tools that increase the ability to get up, move around, and engage together is effective, and that there's nothing more important than developing connection, building unity, especially in smaller group settings, and just providing an engaging and interesting environment for conversation.
Great, thank you. Caitlin.
Hi, this is a really tough task. We had such a great discussion. I think a few of the things that I really thought were great that we talked about were, you know, the challenges of sort of a hybrid model where you might have some people on video, but some people calling in, and the people that are calling in have a really different experience that may be difficult. And so, you know, how do you navigate that? And also making new people to a group feel comfortable. you know, if it's an established committee or group and most of the people know each other already and have had that in-person experience, and now you're bringing in somebody new that maybe it's just a virtual environment, how do you bring them in and make them feel comfortable?
Great, thanks, Caitlin. We're going next to Phil and then to Elle after that. So Phil.
Of course, I can't unmute. A lot of what has already been said. What I'm going to focus on, though, is the engagement through strategic preparation. So ensuring that we're using some of those tools for engagement, ensuring all voices is heard, the facilitation is strong, and as many people as possible are brought into the process. And I'll leave it at that.
Awesome, thanks, Phil. Elle and then Carrie.
One of the ideas that we workshopped at the end of our conversation was how to have people want to join online meetings. There was some resistance from participants wanting to be on online meetings, not because they weren't familiar with the technology, but because they felt like their personalities and who they were wasn't able to be fully conveyed online. So how to make folks feel like they can share their personality and still show up and be present in a virtual space.
Carrie. And then Monique.
We spent a lot of time talking about the tech challenges and as well as the strengths, but trying to do meetings when you have people who are in really different places, understanding how to use Zoom, for instance, or being willing to, and that how much time can be taken just dealing with the logistical, technical details. And then we also talked a lot about the power of preparation, allowing enough time for preparing ahead of time, allowing time for debriefing and processing afterwards, and you know, really making sure you've got everything very well set up ahead of time before you get going.
Great, Monique, and then we'll go to Emily after that.
Yeah, so I think two would be one's redirecting dominators of conversations and people go off on tangents and reminding everyone of outcomes, and then having strong designated hosts that'll help get them back on track. And then educating members, whether it's people who are just new to meeting experiences, or whether it's people who, we talked a lot about trying ways to educate people on connecting to tech and doing one-on-ones, and then having backups like videos downloaded if somebody's supposed to be presenting and their internet fails.
Great.
We
yeah.
We also talked about connectivity issues and two ways, both creating equitable participation, so allowing phone and video for participants, but also for the presenter themselves. Connectivity as being an issue, and one nugget that I would like to share with the group that I think is super helpful that I've seen work as well in the past is if you have connectivity issues, if you log in with Zoom, so your video is available, but also log in with the audio via phone, so that if your video cuts out, you're still able to participate in the meeting until your video comes back up. So
that's great. And finally, Carrie.
Hi, so I think I want to relate back to what Elle said about really engaging and being engaging. And a lot of what we talked about was giving people opportunities to show a little bit of their own personality, even if the meeting isn't necessarily about social connection. So really choosing your check-in questions wisely so that people can give just a little snap of their personality as they answer. One of the questions that was brought as a best practice was, what's your favorite crunch sound? Right? So it gives everybody to be like, oh, my favorite is potato chips. Oh, my favorite is leaves in the fall, right? So you can show who you are. And then also making sure you use your face as much as possible to convey your emotion, whether you're a participant or someone who's presenting, because so many of us are sort of just standing here going, right? And your face is saying, I'm bored, but you might not be, right? Making sure that your face says you're engaged.
Awesome. Hey, can we give a big set of jazz hands maybe to our facilitators who and not only did they do a great job facilitating, but also did a great job of summarizing those conversations really, really well and efficiently. So really, thank you all for being willing to do that. I want to thank you all for joining this first workshop. I mean, I think what you can tell from us is that we're building this thing as we go. That's powerful, and honestly, we want to build this in participation with you all. So I'll think about how we're going to ask you all for some feedback afterwards. We really feel free to just pop me an email, but we'll do some kind of a survey so that any of you who want can share some feedback with us about this workshop. And I really would encourage you to help us spread the word about this. We really, I guess the belief is that we're stronger when we build this group. We know that Vermont is stronger because of the work that you all do, the skills that you develop. You know, you are leaders in your communities and in your work, and you get things done that make our state and our communities a better place. And so our belief is the more we can work together and learn from each other, the stronger we're all going to be. So really want to thank you for that, and encourage you to log on to future workshops and help us spread the word. So with that, I'll say thank you to everybody, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you, John.
Take care, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.